Hey everyone. Wow. What can I say? Um, I again, I just don't think anybody expected what was going to happen on the road of the Tour de France today on the stage 19. I think a lot of people maybe expected the Bernal to attack Ineos, trying to control but not being strong enough. But Bernal definitely, proved that he's the best climber left. Left is the key word in the Tour de France. Key takeaways out of the stage. I think the abandonment of Thibaut Pinot is the greatest takeaway from this stage and the greatest takeaway from the Tour de France because it completely changed the way the teams were riding. It completely changed the whole outcome of the Tour de France, and it completely changed the whole thing from the early breakaway to Ineos going up front with the Koenig and trying to control the whole thing. Who again, who could have predicted? And Mark Madiot and FDJ did a really good job actually not releasing or not leaking any information that Thibaut Pinot was actually hurt in some way. Apparently, from what I heard, maybe you can correct me on the comments. Apparently, I heard it was a tear in a muscle that was, or something that was created from hitting a handlebar, right? While avoiding a crash. That's what I heard. But we had absolutely no idea. Nobody had any idea that Thibaut Pinot was actually hurting or he was hurt or, any of that. That was really, really interesting. Now, again, good job by FDJ for keeping the secret and not leaking it out. But it was obvious that everybody from the team kind of knew because all the riders kind of just like they were reacting like they kind of knew what was going on, right? The FDJ did not send riders back, okay? FDJ did not really speak that much the day after the stage 18. There were just a couple of comments. Good for the team spirit that nobody really leaked it out. Whether everybody's afraid of Marc Madiot, which could, the person could be difficult, right? As we know, Marc Madiot is, it can be a difficult person in a tour, but you know, they didn't leak the news, and it was a complete shock to everyone today. All the analysts, all the commentators, all the journalists, everything else was absolutely in complete shock. To see Thibaut Pinot abandon the Tour de France again. It would have been really interesting how Thibaut Pinot would have been up there, right? Remember what happened today. Ineos set the pace, at least kind of on the ease around. They did not have the strength to do it earlier, right? Garen Thomas, I thought that Wood Pools dropped a little bit early, right? And then you had Garen Thomas attack, all right? That wasn't really going anywhere because Kreiswick kind of brought him back. And then you had what? You had Bernal was a teammate, right? You did not see him try to chase back. He just clawed himself way back after Kreiswick. And then you had Bernal attack, and at that point, I thought that good Thibaut Pinot would have been able to gone with him, and that was his Tour de France. That was the difference, right? It was Thibaut Pinot's Tour de France to win, okay? Because he was 150 behind, and who knows what would have happened on the final climb. Who knows if they would even get the gap? Because if Thibaut Pinot is not working, or Bernal is not working, then the other guys are chasing back to him. So the race would have been completely different. My hunch would have been that Bernal and Thibaut Pinot would have worked together over the Iseran, right? And then if that would be the end of the of the race, then that would have put Thibaut Pinot between, he was what, 130, 150, 20? Depending on if he would have gotten a bonus or not, it would have been between 22 and 17 seconds. Between 22 and 17 seconds. Tomorrow, we would have absolute fireworks on Val Thorens. So really too bad for every fan. Just, really, really sorry to hear Thibaut Pinot and see him watch Thibaut Pinot really brokenhearted go into the car and abandon the race. And I'm really hoping to see him back again, right? He has had a lot of problems with his health, a lot of abandons. He came good in 2015, right? But he's always good. But there's just always obstacles, bad days. There's always not paying attention, like in this Tour de France, right, on that roundabout. In the echelons. There's always something, and I really think that I'm going to be the first one to say it here, but I really think that Thibaut Pinot needs a real team around him. I'm not sure if they need to get an extra budget. I'm not sure if how much budget they have, and I think FDJ is a much smaller team than teams like Jumbo or Ineos, right? But they really need a bigger budget to give Thibaut Pinot people around him so he can actually challenge for the tour, right? Give him rollers, give him two, three guys that can really do well and chase basically any problems in a wind. Give him one more climber, a serious climber, right? So I mean, it's certainly he's got a lot of potential. He's got a lot of future left, but he doesn't have much time. He maybe has one more or two more chances. And unfortunately for Thibaut Pinot, that was his Tour de France. That was his Tour de France to win because I mean the only competition was really climbing was really Bernal, so it would have been between those two, right? Bernal had probably equal chances to Thibaut Pinot. But unfortunately, in the coming Tour de France's, we're looking at longer time trials, flatter time trials. We're also looking at, Chris Froome being back, right? So that always changes the whole thing. So yeah, spending time on this because I thought this was a huge issue, and this really was a major outcome on the race tomorrow, on the race today, and on the entire Tour de France. Bigger than the weather. Of course, the decision for the commissars took today was a right one, right? I mean, you saw the pictures. I didn't have to tell you, that they couldn't go through the little mudslide, and especially the water, right? The torrential water that was down from you created from by the ice storm, right? By the hail. So they couldn't have gone through there. The question that I would pose to everyone was the gaps, right? They decided to go with the gaps over the top. I thought that they should have taken the gaps in a village on the bottom of the descent where the weather was still good, right? Because the gaps would have been actually a lot lower. I actually think Alaphilippe was getting closer, and I thought that he was about 15 seconds closer to Bernal than he was before, which would have made a more interesting race tomorrow. But it is what it is. So one mistake that I thought that commissars have made was not taking the gaps on the bottom of the descent, rather by opting taking it on the top of the Lise round. One could speculate how this would have turned out in terms of like coming to Val Thorens had the weather been a little bit better, right? Whether Bernal would have solidified his lead and extend his lead on the final climb, or whether Alaphilippe would have catch back to the Kreiswick and Thomas group and get a little bit closer. I can only give you how I feel, right? And how I feel would have been that I think Alaphilippe, with the way he was descending, he was getting closer, and before the end, not before the final descent, but I think at the bottom of Val Thorez, right? I mean, Tignes, right? So off the descent and 8 kilometers in or 10 kilometers in a valley, I think Alaphilippe would catch back with a Kreiswick and Thomas group. And I think that a lot more riders like Rigoberto Urán, Vincenzo Nibali, I think Landa would have also gotten back, right? World Pools, that would have been a key right there. World Pools would have cut up. Maybe Valverde would have been there too. So the question would then have been if the movie star would have joined Jumbo and also Alaphilippe and maybe the Koenig if Mas would have cut back on chasing Bernal, right? Chasing Bernal to the very bottom of that climb, only 7 kilometers high. Only the bottom, remember, of Tignes would have actually, would have kind of be good for Bernal. So now the question would have been whether Bernal was really this powerful or what if he would have faltered, right? Because the amount of chasing that he had to do, amount of climbing alone in a wind, right? What if he would actually falter a little bit towards the top? My hunch is that he probably would have, right? He would have probably win the stage, but my hunch is that he would have lost a lot of time on the bottom, right? Especially in the valley. He would have lost the time on a descent. I think on the bottom of, I'm thinking that on the bottom of Val Thorens, he's getting maybe, he's probably 50 seconds to a minute up. And up by the top, he's probably a minute 30, minute 40 up on Alaphilippe. That's what I'm thinking. So, so it would have been certainly working out for, maybe a little bit the same, but I think it would have been maybe 15 seconds to, maybe let's just say 20 seconds to 10 seconds better for Alaphilippe in the end, right? Again, and it would have made the whole difference in the world for tomorrow because 45 seconds versus 30 seconds, right, or 25 seconds is another ball game. So, but the commissars had to make a decision. They made a decisions, as they, saw, and it probably would have been really hard to get time gaps on the bottom of the descent in the village. So they made their decisions. What else? Quintana's legs were not there for sure, right? I thought he was going to get back in the race. He was just not at his percent. Instead of improving, he paid for his effort yesterday. What else? Bernal and Ineos are definitely the clear winners of today's stage. I thought a silent winner of today's stage was also Badret because how they cut the cut the stage. Caruso was actually getting closer to him in in a polka dot jersey chase. The way it worked out, so it actually worked out for Badret. Losers, pretty much everybody else, right? I'm not gonna include Pinot in the loser thing because it was just really sad what happened to him. But I definitely Thomas is definitely a loser today. He came out the worst out of the two favorites for the Ineos team, right? I know what they're gonna say. I know what the leadership that teammates, blah blah blah, all of that. But I think Thomas was hoping that he was gonna be the leader and he was gonna win the tour. So I think he comes across as maybe the biggest losers together with Alaphilippe, who actually tried really hard. So he may actually end this tour in the top three. Kreiswick and Bookman for not really doing much, right? Bookman was just following the wheels. Kreiswick tried to attack just a little bit once. I thought Simon Yates was definitely, I don't want to say a loser, but kind of unfortunate, right? Because he would have gotten a free ride from Bernal to the bottom of the climb and probably to the finish to win. Warren Barguil also, right? He probably had a chance at catching back. Um, Emmanuel Bookman as well, right? Was another one that was kind of a loser because now Emmanuel Bookman is looking at finishing at 5 and 6, only fifth and sixth place. I think Emmanuel Bookman really needs to attack on tomorrow's stage, really needs to make a difference if he wants to be in the top three in a Tour de France. Remember, Bookman has leadership issues with Micah, right? Micah was sixth in a tour. He's never had a good Tour de France. He's probably going to, either leave, right, or maybe, go to a different team or maybe stay. I'm not sure how this is going to work out, but there's a leadership issue between Micah and Bookman needs to improve um, for the tour. Also, Bookman, I think, is a little younger, so but I just expect a little bit more out of Bookman. I mean, what has he got to lose, right? He's just following wheels pretty much the whole Tour de France. I want him to attack. Um, Rigoberto Urán, definitely unfortunate for him that the stage ended in the way it ended. He would have actually caught back to the group of Thomas and Kreiswick. He was not too far away. We'll have to see for that time gap, right? Because the official time gap from the race radio was actually wrong on Rigoberto Urán. Um, Richie Port was surprising. He actually dropped off and he was behind all the guys that was in front of him in a GC. And really the biggest thing for me too, I should mention that as well, is that now with Bernal leading and possibly winning the Tour de France, you have big time issues at Ineos, right? It's kind of like an off point of talking about it. It's kind of an after Tour de France thing, but like a really really interesting thing unfolds now at Ineos, right? They originally slated Bernal to go to Giro d'Italia, right? So they didn't have him in a mix, okay? He didn't go to that because he broke his hand, so they decided to bring him in to help Chris Froome and Geraint Thomas. Chris Froome had a terrible crash previewing the Dauphian stage, right? On his time trial bike, crashed out, breaking several bones, and he is out of the Tour de France, out for the rest of the year. So now Bernal comes into a team as a co-leader, right? Probably barring an accident or a super bad day, Bernal wins the Tour de France. So now you have this young 22, 23-year-old Colombian on the top of the world winning the Tour de France. And now you have a problem because you have returning Chris Froome as a leader. You have Geraint Thomas, who definitely wants to be a leader, a former winner of a Tour de France. And you have that young Colombian gun, right? Egan Bernal, the eagle, right, of Colombia, the youngest out of all of them, on whom you should be building your future as a team. Now, besides the point, the team is a British team, though, right? It's not a Colombian team; it's a British team. So it's an issue because it's kind of an English thing, right? Where they're going for what? For Geraint Thomas, right? Um, you know, uh, uh, Chris Froome, I mean, South African, but he's really English in a way, right? He grew up in England and all of that, so he really, although he feels South African, he also probably feels more English than that. So so that is interesting, right? Because the team is the team means is to develop what British riders, right? So again, who goes and who stays, right? It's going to be really interesting to watch this throughout the fall, how this works out with Egan Bernal, Geraint Thomas, and Chris Froome, I think one of them will leave. And my hunch is, I'm not sure this year or next year. My hunch is that actually one of them, and I think maybe Egan Bernal, would go somewhere else to maybe a Spanish team, right? We don't know, but who has the budget for him? That's another question, right? So maybe if Egan Bernal does not go, Geraint Thomas will go, right? Chris Froome stays with Ineos, gets a crack on another Tour de France maybe next year, right? Uh, Egan Bernal's best chance to win the Tour de France next year is probably more time trials. So this is where he could certainly lose the tour. This is where he needs to improve to keep winning the tours, right? Because not every tour is only going to have one time trial, 28 kilometers, 27 kilometers rolling. So I would expect Chris Froome for sure stays in at Ineos, and then it's going to be between Bernal and between Thomas to leave. I'm thinking that probably Thomas's chances of leaving are a little bit greater than Bernal's, but this all depends on whether Colombia, yes, Colombia, will try to have its own outfit, its own team, because they certainly have enough riders to do that. Now there's going to be a fantastic backing, fantastic support in Colombia for a Colombian team to be on the Tour de France, right? And even if there's a Colombian team that is not pro tour that includes Egan Bernal, they're inviting him anyway. Okay, so it's not an issue of a crazy amount of pro tour money. Now, of course, he needs support, Bernal, but there's plenty of Colombian climbers out there that could join him and do very well with him. And I think everybody around the world would welcome a Colombian outfit. If there is one, if there are plans, Egan Bernal would probably go there because he feels just simply more comfortable. So we'll just have to see how this plays out between the three leaders on Ineos and who will stay and who will leave. But mark my words, one of them will actually leave Team Ineos and go somewhere else to be a sole leader. All right, guys. What else from the tour? Well, boy, I don't think we expected it, right? But it played out in a most unexpected way that we could have expected. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that before in terms of like the ice. There was a couple of, in the early 2000s, then in the 90s, there were a couple of tours like this, but certainly super, super exciting. I can't wait to see tomorrow. We'll just have to see how it plays out, whether it'll be a Ineos controlling all day or somebody will try to attack on that dangerous descent of the Col de Longvelo and then on this mythical climb up to Val Thorens. Okay, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this short recap of the stage, the key moments of it. Stay tuned for the preview of the stage 20. Just curious about your comments, what you thought about the time gap difference today, what you thought about different attacks. How did Thibaut Pinot's, abandonment and his problems affected the entire race? How do you think it would have, play out had there wouldn't be an ice storm on the bottom of the Lisorad? How do you think would have worked out in the end if Bernal would have kept or extended his advantage off, or he would falter a little bit towards the end, and that would have allowed Alaphilippe to come back or perhaps have only a 10-20 second deficit. Okay. All right. Thank you for watching. If you like it, hit like. If you like the channel, subscribe, and hopefully you keep riding out there. It's beautiful, and it's a prime time to do a good ride today. All right. Thanks, guys.